paper, which is in here somewhere, I think. One moment. So we have this thing. Yes, I think this will be it's the decision about my housing benefits. This is old, so I can use this as a grinding paper. So the topic of this video, this thing called VAIDS, which is vaccine-acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. This is very new, and I cannot confirm whether or not it is real. So please don't hit me with the fact checkers, because as I have stated, I don't know if this is true. I've read some articles from reputable sources that claim that it is true. And I've also read some articles from reputable sources that claim it is not true. So take it with a Dead Sea's worth of salt. The idea is that if you give a vaccine to any disease, as far as I understand, there is motivational logic. If you give a vaccine on any topic, say tetanus vaccine, and the vaccine has a efficiency time of 10 years, meaning that from the first injection, you are guaranteed to be immune to tetanus for 10 years, let's say. Now, if you need to take a second dose after 10 years, and then you are immune for 9 years, then you have, I believe, according to what these people are saying, vaccine-acquired immunodeficiency, meaning that every time you get a vaccine, it will work for a shorter and shorter period of time until eventually it won't work and your immune system is no longer protected against the disease. That is what the proponents of this vaccine-acquired immunodeficiency theory state. They are saying that every time you put out a vaccine, any vaccine, you will have some people who will have a immune halting response because of the number of vaccines already given. Now, as far as I know, in theory, this is true, but not for everyone. There is a smallish percentage of people who will literally get this. Oh, there it is. Who will literally get this immune system collapse due to vaccines. Now, to comparison this with AIDS, as in immunodeficiency or immune collapse from a viral infection. Now, if you have the HI virus and you acquire enough of the virus in your body that you proceed to full-blown AIDS, in that moment, the best method to fight against the disease is to actually kill the parts of your immune system that the virus feeds on, because they can no longer fight against the virus and they are its primary food. So killing those parts of your immune system that the virus turns into a buffet to make more viruses is the last stage of treatment that we have for HI, which is essentially AIDS at that point. So the fact that your immune system in some obscure cases notices that the virus is dangerous enough that it actually infects only a certain percentage or a certain type rather of your immune system cells, and through that breeds in those cells exclusively and then fucks you up. In that case, VAIDS would actually be beneficial in the destruction of those immune system cells so that the virus cannot feed on them. That or a bone marrow transplant to make new types of immune cells. When HIV first came around, one of the first thoughts I literally had about it is bone marrow transplant. That's literally one of the first thoughts I had about it. So I cannot say much about this supposed vaccine-acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, other than that it theoretically fits with what I know about physics. But I'm not the kind of doctor who would be comfortable in doing Fauci-like comments, so I will refrain. But from my point of view, I still stand by my original decision. If you are using the vaccines which are made from compressed antibodies, then do not give them to the general public. And if you are making a vaccine which is from some other source, I do not know what, but if you do make it from the one that I put out, which is the immune systems purified from other sources, then what you will see is very fast progression towards very high transmissibility and very low fatality. That's what will happen. Everybody will get it, but very few people will die. Now, the vaccine that I proposed in my model is one that in fact makes you more likely to get the disease, and it may or may not be milder based on you getting the vaccine, but the probability of it mutating in a healthy body with no secondary diseases like HIV into a very dangerous form is very low. So if we find the healthy parts of our society, I wouldn't say the first medical responders because this is a medical crisis. I mean, like average healthy people, and give them that vaccine and wait until somebody develops a vaccine with much lower side risks. We will see those people get the disease first, and we will be able to adjust how we treat people based on knowing how it actually affects people. And those people who get the vaccine first will have a very strong immunity after the initial onset. The disease will infect those people who get the vaccine. That is near certain, but it will be contained in the group that got the vaccine, and they will be able to be the test bed case for a mutation which is very transmissible and very undamaging. That would be our primary objective with this disease, to get it to interact with humanity in a way that resembles other pathogens which we deal with on a regular basis instead of literally the plague. Now, a lot of people don't realize that when you had no secondary diseases, you were just old, and not even very old. I'm talking 40, 50. The chance from the initial wave of corona for you to die if you got infected was 3%. 3%. That's about 1 in 20, which is very high for a disease. Flu has something on the order of 1 to 100 to 1 to 1,000 if you get it on the background. And once we figured out, based on the first wave of people who got the disease in a controlled environment, how to treat the disease in an equally controlled environment, despite the disease being the same, this was before the second mutation, our hospital policy improved significantly. Our ability to know what works against that disease. Does smoking increase or decrease your risk? Does drinking a lot of vitamin T increase or decrease your risk? Because this wasn't happening due to the vaccine policy to people who had multiple diseases and were in a position where you cannot afford to test on medication. But this was happening to young people who, even if they get the disease, are unlikely to get anything life-threatening. And we could, in a very quick way, figure out how to lessen the symptoms and how to treat them properly. And that was absolutely critical. If this disease, as it seems to, targets mostly old people and sick people, if those are our only patients stuck in terms of being able to figure out what works, what antibodies work, what antivirals work, you will take a long time on a group of people that cannot afford to wait. If you make a contained sample of the disease and test in those groups how the medications work, and you get like 2 or 3 weeks advantage on the primary spike of the pandemic, then it is very likely that the fatality rate for the disease will drop sharply because you know what medications work. I'm not talking about Trump's hydrochloroquine. I'm talking about actual like medications and not drinking bleach. And that is why by the time the second mutation came around, which was actually more transmissible and more harmful because it was made in the general public due to the not very much vaccine during the second outbreak, we had a fatality rate that was approaching influenza. So people were kind of rightly so asking whether or not this disease is so bad. And they weren't understanding that they were comparing influenza stay-at-home numbers to hospitalization for corona numbers. So despite it looking like it did the same amount of damage, it was still considerably harsher than like flu. So once we got the vaccine rates up, and that was, I hope, with the vaccines you guys developed, looking at the map here on which vaccine has the least side effects and what has the most side effects and so on. And looking at them, the third wave, you'd basically completely figured out what medications work on the standard version of the disease and so on. And with the high rate of vaccination at that point, you started to realize that this disease is too wise to be stopped by a vaccine. But by that point, we'd already figured out like what pressure to use the breathing machines on and so forth. So the disease dropped from a high percentage of cases requiring specialized care to most cases being able to do with light inpatient program. And at that point, the disease started to basically ebb away. People started to protest heavily against restrictions because they knew on the ground what they were seeing with the disease. So roughly around that time, the third variation, or the fourth, which you're calling the Omicron, came around, which is just as we desired for it to be, highly transmissible and very non-fatal. So now, if it produces a highly transmissible and highly fatal version, it will kill its transmission body before it starts to spread like the Omicron. And getting Omicron, which has a low fatality, high contraction rate, means that you'll be much, much better protected against other variants of corona. And combining that with the vaccine actually, in any form, makes you quite protected against corona. Now we're talking regional flu, and that's about it. And the fatality rate is somewhere between 2 or 3 extra million deaths per the entire planet per the pandemic, to something on the order of 6 million deaths on the entire planet. So we're talking about something on the order of the Holocaust in terms of fatalities. And that's keeping in mind we have a population of 7.5 billion. So a death rate of 6 million out of 7.5 to almost 8 billion is about 0.1%. And if you have a passenger airplane hitting another passenger airplane midair, which is what this was roughly speaking, and the fatality rate is 0.1%, then the guy doing most of the work is not a human and it isn't me. Because this kind of pandemic, based on what the background political situation was, had every potential to kill 6 billion, not 6 million. So it does kind of prove that people, in the grand scheme of things, aren't interested in maximum damage to opponent. They're interested in something resembling proportional damage or mitigating damage. Because keep in mind, we're working from the floater theory, calling this the floater virus. To me, it seems like an acute awareness of flu, but not flu itself causing this virus. Something like being aware that you can influence your real world by dreaming and then panicking and turning that into some form of disease. That's what it looks like to me. But we will see in 100 years when all the research has been done. So thank you for watching. Long story short, there's news in the health community of something called vaccine-acquired autoimmune deficiency syndrome. And I do not know if it's true or not, but I'm hearing rumblings. Thank you.